What's up guys, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how we're actively implementing AI at the front with using code at the core, which is my personal belief, and how we're tackling integrating AI into what it is that we're actively building in terms of systems, with the main mission of being to show our builds raw and real, basically to show you the good, the bad, the ugly, also to solve where it hurts, big messy organizational problems within businesses, and also just to call in visionaries, basically people that understand what it is that we're building, and also just to build a network of cool people doing cool things. And I've broken this down into 5 simple steps, of which is the first one is AI as a front facing amplifier, of which why this matters is because interface shapes behavior. AI can become the new UI UX layer, natural language, smart recommendations, and conversational flows. So why this is so important is because the belief that I have as AI, integrating AI, we personally don't just want to integrate AI for the sake of integrating. It's mainly just asking the questions of where can we possibly integrate AI as a front facing tool and use that as an amplifier in what it is that we're doing, and by actively prototyping chat driven dashboards for killer chaos. So basically asking users, saying, hey, what's the bottleneck this week, and surface metrics immediately. So basically just using this AI as a front facing layer within our tech stack to say, hey, AI is going to be the tool that we're going to use as a front facing tool, and then on the back end we're just going to be using code. Because one of the things that I've seen is so many people implement AI just for the sake of implementing it, but one of the things that I am bullish on is saying, hey, we can use AI as a front facing tool, and then on the back end we can just use code and just understand what it is that we're actively building for by integrating AI where we actually need it for mundane tasks as well. So experimenting with AI for data ingestion, so auto tagging incoming leads, parsing vendors, updates, summarizing meetings, which is one of the things that we're using as a front facing to say, hey, we have all these meetings, we have all these vendor tracking things that we need to implement and update. So let's just use AI specifically for these tools in terms of our tool stack. And yet every AI interaction hooks into a custom backend pipeline that which we have control. So no black box that I can't inspect or improve, because ultimately the main aim is to have AI as a front facing tool, and ultimately on the back end have a code base that we can custom build and that we have full control over. Because one of the things is you don't want to get into a situation where you're actively having AI plug into every single thing, but you don't understand how to actually control it. So this is my personal framework, and the lesson that I've learned from this is AI can accelerate adoption and reduce friction, but its value peaks only when tethered with a robust system, with the robust system just being the custom backend that we integrate into AI. So treating AI as a smart lens into your data, our data for example, and workflows, not as the entire engine, because now we aren't fully focused on depending on using AI. We have our own custom backend that also powers, and we can plug in AI, which ultimately allows us to have that edge where we say, hey, we have this custom built thing that we use powered by AI, and we're actively just implementing that into what it is that we're building. And the grounding question I like to ask here for using AI as a front facing amplifier is, grounding question is, what user-facing task could AI simplify in my system today, and how will I ensure the underlying data slash model logic stays transparent and maintainable? Which is the number one thing, because you need to ensure that the model or logic that you're using for this AI stays transparent and maintainable in the long term, because we're not just building for today, we're building for the future, and we're actively just trying to understand where we can refine the process and simplify the tasks that consume a lot of time. Some places make sense to plug in AI, and we will get into that, and just some other senses make sense just to build a whole custom backend platform. So this is why it leads into the second point, which is custom backend remains irreplaceable, and this is just my take on it. I'm super bullish on this to say, hey, custom backend remains irreplaceable because it's your competitive advantage in the long term, especially if you're just using especially if you're just using business logic, data integrity, and unique workflows live at its core. Off the shelf or low code can capture nuances, high stake processes, because in as much as you can plug in AI is not able just yet to be able to interpret certain things that only humans can at this point in time, maybe into the future. But you need to have AI plug in, like for example, we say, hey, designing modular services for chaos OS, saying each domain, operations tracking, forecasting, alerts lives in a well-defined code modules. Why this is important is to build it in such a way that it has modules, because we want it to act as a separate entity. So if it breaks, we are able to modularly fix it. So basically having different parts of it and just fix that, integrate that separate part on its own as a standalone part. So basically saying, hey, writing tests and contracts around AI inputs, outputs, so any AI driven features fail safely if assumptions change. So this also just allows us to move more tactically into the future to say, hey, if we're plugging in AI into this, then we can see that, hey, it's not fully working, and we can isolate that specific part in terms of AI and just fix what we need to fix. And choosing proven languages / frameworks, as well as understanding deeply, so I can optimize performance and maintain security. Because one of the things that I have also noticed is a question that might come up is, how can you maintain security with having AI? And we're actively just super in the trenches just figuring this out as well. But what we've actively now are starting to implement is measures in place and workflows to say, hey, if we're implementing AI into this specific part, how do we then segment it from the main core functions, and then in order to build from that. And we just are constantly just learning from this. And the lesson that I've learned is AI won't eliminate the need for solid engineering. I'm super bullish on this, that hey, solid engineering is still going to be there in the long term. In fact, integrating AI well demands diligence, data pipelines, visioning and monitoring. The backend code base is where the durable value sits, basically saying, hey, the most value that we have is in the code base, and just by simply having control of the code base, we ultimately still remain having control of the entire project or system that we're building out. And the grounding question I like to ask here is, which parts of my system require bespoke logic that AI can't readily replace, and how can I prioritize coding those first? So basically saying, hey, in order of preference, in order of precedence, how can we actively just improve this system from this point of view, and just actively just implement AI logic into that. And just moving into the third point, which is AI plus code collaboration. So I'm super bullish on having AI and code collaborate. So not just saying, hey, we're not looking at AI at all. It's just asking the questions of how can we actively implement it in places where it makes sense and places where it doesn't make sense. And why this matters is breaking down problems into fundamentals from first principles and saying, hey, data processes outcomes before layering AI, so that we ensure that we understand every single moving part in terms of how the data flows, how the process flows, and how the outcome that we want to have, how we've been building towards that. And if we truly understand that, then we can integrate AI as a layer within that. And avoiding tools that just worship, start with why for each feature, not just saying, hey, let's just implement this just for the sake of it, but asking, hey, how does this integrate into our infrastructure, and how can we make sure that it is secure and also scalable into the future. So saying, hey, we have full control over the code base and we're integrating AI into this, but we don't want to get it to a point where we just don't know where everything is and we don't have full control over that. And how I'm actively doing this is mapping each business need, saying, hey, what outcome do we want? Then what data and logic produces that outcome, and where can AI assist? Basically asking from first principles, where can AI plug into our current system in order to provide the most value, and not just plug it for the sake of plugging it. And I think this is something that we're actively just constantly trying to learn, to say, hey, we need to implement AI into this specific part, but we might not need to implement it in parts where it requires human logic and just a human person just being there. And running small experiments, saying, hey, deploy an AI prompt for a narrow task. So just seeing, hey, we're running emails, let's just deploy AI specifically for emails, and then measuring accuracy slash ROI, then integrating into backend workflows only when consistent value adds. So what we also just are implementing at this current present moment in time is saying, hey, we have this AI, we're gonna plug it in, see how it works, and when we see how it works, then we're gonna scale it up, or we're gonna say, hey, it's not worth integrating after a period of monitoring and just making sure that the data is consistent. Because one of the things is you need accurate data, and if it's not producing that within your workflow and you've just implemented it without actively testing and going through that process, you're going to find out your data is just going to be wonky, and that's the number one thing that you don't want. And that's what we're actively just meticulously taking a look at and diving deep into questioning and saying, hey, documenting assumptions as well, saying, hey, AI can classify vendor risk by X accuracy. What fallback is if classified fails? So basically just asking, hey, well, this is the percentage of accuracy, and this is how the fallback is going to be if this classification fails. And just constantly just understanding that from first principles. And the lesson that we have learned and that I've learned is, don't bolt AI just for the sake of it. I know I've said it many times. A first principles roadmap ensures that you invest engineering efforts where it amplifies real impact, not chasing every new model release. So saying, hey, this new model just released, let's just plug it into our system without actively monitoring how it works. This is one of the things that I am very, very cautious about, especially just integrating it into systems, is saying, hey, let's just implement this. Let's not run tests. Let's not do the due diligence that we need to. Because if you don't do that and then it starts producing wonky data that is not accurate, then you have a serious problem. But just having this AI run as a test subject and saying, hey, test 1 ran like this, test 2 ran like this, test 3 ran like this, and then comparing the data and saying, hey, this one is the most accurate, let's run it for a set period of time and see how it runs in the long term. And if it does eventually, like say, hey, a month or two after, if it starts acting weird and then we need to update it and just constantly refine it, then we say, hey, let's pick a new model, let's run this back, let's constantly just implement the system that ultimately allows us to just integrate AI where it makes sense, and also just to pick the right tools for the tool stack, for the tech stack that we do have. And the grounding question I like to ask here is, for each feature adding AI to, have I defined its fundamental purpose and failure modes before coding or integrating? Just asking, hey, have I clearly defined why we're using this from a fundamental perspective? Why is it that we're integrating this? Is it specifically for data flows? Is it specifically that, hey, we just want to automate specific tasks? Do we just want to say, hey, we want to generate summaries of all the emails that we have, and then we just want to have a prompt that allows us to see, hey, what are the keywords that we're picking up from here, and how can we constantly just tailor our messaging towards that, and just purely just understanding that, but also just not making it in the sense that, hey, we're just plugging it in but not asking the questions, why are we plugging it in, and also testing, rigorous testing of why it is that we're plugging this in. And which ultimately leads to the fourth point, which is balancing automation with deep problem solving. And why this matters is, from first principles, automation scales routine work, but deep engineering solves novel and complex edge cases. So basically saying, hey, both are critical, but over automating without understanding can introduce hidden risks of you having cognitive offloading, of saying, hey, we're just gonna say, hey, AI is gonna run this and we're not gonna know what is going on. And then when it breaks, you're gonna be like, hey, we've automated so many things, now things are breaking, where do we even start? And this is where deep problem solving, I believe, is where it comes in powerful, because we're just actively saying, hey, we need to understand the hidden edges and complexities within the system that we're integrating, and understanding why it is that we're automating what it is that we're automating, and just constantly just refining that and refining the process as well. And how we're doing it, or how I'm doing it, is automating straightforward tasks with AIs, like I mentioned, emails, data parsing, but routing exceptions to human review or richer logic modules, basically saying, hey, we're going gonna say, hey, humans need to review XYZ because AI might produce inaccurate data, and carving out deep dives where I write custom algorithms or business rules for tricky scenarios, saying, hey, complex forecasting, anomaly detection, areas where off the shelf normally fails. We say, hey, I need to carve out a deep dive analysis to say, hey, if this happens into the future, how do we actively tailor for that? And monitoring as well, building dashboards that flag when AI driven tasks deviate so I can iterate code or just adjust the prompts. And this is what I'm actively in the trenches going bullish on, and just understanding, hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to have a defined process in what it is that we're actively building in terms of integrating and automating AI on the front end. And the lesson that I've learned from this, and I'm sure a lot of people can also take from this, is true leverage comes from knowing what to automate fully, what to semi-automate, and what to solve from first principles in code. So basically having that first principles approach to say, hey, we want to take first principles and we want to understand each and every moving part from its core, and we want to build from that. We want to use code specifically from code, and we want to integrate AI where AI needs to handle the automation processes that we may need into the future. And the boundary shifts over time, but the mindset stays consistent, because having that mindset, I know that into the future we're just constantly just going to refine the machine and say, hey, we're going to integrate AI into XYZ position because we've clearly defined why it is that we're integrating it into that specific spot. And the grounding question I like to ask here is, where is my current workflow where in my current workflow is automation adding risk or hidden complexity, and where does deep coding unlock new capabilities no AI can yet provide? So just by asking this question, you uncover so much from a first principles perspective to say, hey, in my current workflow, where can I add AI, but where is it adding risk, and where is it adding hidden complexity, and where is this hidden complexity found? And just by constantly just refining and understanding this, I know that we will unlock a whole new level of understanding, which ultimately leads us to understanding the fifth point that ties everything together, is the AI evolution but code endures. And I'm super bullish on this, of saying, hey, models and frameworks evolve rapidly for sure, like that is well known, but underlying business logic and data contracts change slowly. Understanding that as well is super crucial to say, hey, these things move fast, but also business logic moves slow as well. And separating concerns ensures you swap AI components without rewriting the core, because business logic is its core, and just by purely understanding that before you rewrite it through AI is going to unlock the game. And I know that into the future we're solely just going to go bullish on this and just constantly just refine this process even further. And how I'm doing this is clearly defining APIs where APIs need to be in terms of AI layers and the core system, so I can upgrade models or provide smoothly. So basically saying, hey, we need AI in XYZ position, we need to implement APIs, and the core system, we need to upgrade it in this certain position. And also allowing storing raw data and immediate representations, and not just AI outputs, so I can retain and audit later. One of the things is auditing, just having that process of saying, hey, we're going to capture whatever we're getting and just track it, because the number one thing you want to have is just solely just track it, track all the metrics. Is it working? Is it actually providing ROI? Yes, it may be quicker, but is it sustainable in the long term, such that you don't have to constantly just refine, change different models, and it's something that builds on top of the core functions of the business layer. And also just keeping the code base modular, saying, hey, AI related tasks are isolated with well-defined interfaces at the rest, basically using AI as a front-facing tool and saying, hey, AI tools will improve, but if your code logic is tangled with specific models, you risk lock-in or brittleness. Lock-in in the sense that, hey, you're locked into using this specific AI model and you can't leave because you've built everything around that, and saying, hey, you have no control over your code base. And this is the number one thing that is so powerful, because you need to have sole control over your code base, because if you don't have this, you don't know what's going on, and it's going to own you if you don't fully understand this. And designing for change, saying, hey, code for stability, integrate for AI and agility, saying, hey, we need to code for stability into the long term to make sure that what it is that we're building is codable, is is codable and also sustainable into the long term, and also maintainable as well, so that we have full control over that. And if we need to integrate AI, we do it with agility, and also we do it knowing that, hey, we've built this code base for XYZ reason, and this is why we're constantly just adding new AI into this. How we're adding AI into this. And the grounding question I like to ask here is my system structured so that I can replace or upgrade AI models without breaking key workflows? Saying, hey, we have this structured out, but we want to build it and integrate AI into this model, into this specific process and system without breaking the key workflows, because we understand how the code base and the core functionalities from the fundamentals are going to be into the future. And just by solely just having control over that, we're just going to actively implement where AI where we need it, and just not actively implementing it blind, but just taking an approach of saying, hey, we're going to implement it in XYZ position solely because it's going to yield us an ROI of X percentage, and just constantly just refining this process. This is just my take. I know that into the future, we're just going to refine this, and we're just going to learn a lot more from this, and just keep on learning as much as we can in terms of how to implement AI, and having processes in terms of implementing AI, and taking an approach that, hey, we're building for the future and we want to integrate for the future as well where it makes sense, and just constantly having that feedback loop of saying, hey, we want to keep on learning, we want to keep on making mistakes, we want to keep on failing, and we just want to keep on learning. This is my own personal take of how I'm actively doing this and how I'm doing it into the future. This may change, and for now, looking into the future, we will use this as a mental model to build off of. But the number one thing is that we just keep on building what it is that we're building, and implementing and integrating where it makes sense, and actually just building the best possible service that we can for our client base, and also just to create as much value as we possibly can. And if you enjoy this video, make sure to connect with me on X, Instagram, and I will see you guys in the next video.